The rain had been falling for 2 hours straight when Ethan Caldwell finally turned his truck onto Route 9, heading home. It was the kind of November night that made a man grateful for 4 walls and a working heater, the kind of night where the world outside felt like it had been erased, replaced by nothing but wet asphalt and darkness and the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers. In the back seat, his 4-year-old daughter Lily was asleep, her small head tilted against the window, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt what he always felt in those quiet moments. That specific, overwhelming gratitude that had no name, the kind that lives in your chest like a warm stone. He had been a single father since Lily was 6 months old. His wife, Claire, had not left dramatically. There had been no screaming, no thrown plates, no final confrontation. She had simply woken up one morning, looked at the life they were building in Millbrook, Tennessee, the small house, the mechanic shop, the slow and honest rhythm of it all, and decided it was not the life she wanted. She kissed Lily on the forehead, left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and drove away. Ethan had stood in the doorway holding his daughter and watched the taillights disappear and made a decision right then, that he would not fall apart, not with Lily in his arms, not ever. And he had kept that promise to himself for 4 years. He worked. He showed up. He made the pancakes and read the bedtime stories and fixed the broken toys and held the small hand through the nightmares. He was not a perfect man, but he was a present one, and in Millbrook, people respected that. He was 3 miles from home when he saw her. At first, in the sweep of his headlights, he thought it was a pile of fabric someone had dumped on the roadside, a flash of deep red against the wet grass at the edge of the shoulder. Then the fabric moved. He slowed the truck, leaned forward, and the headlights caught the full picture, a woman, standing alone in the rain, soaked to the bone, wearing what had once been an elaborate red gown. The skirt was torn from the knee down on one side, the fabric heavy with water, clinging to her legs. Her hair was loose and dark and plastered to her face and neck. She was not waving him down. She was not trying to flag anyone. She was simply standing there, arms wrapped around herself, looking at nothing. Ethan pulled over without thinking twice. He rolled down the window. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" She turned toward him slowly, like the question had taken a moment to reach her. In the pale light from the truck's interior, he could see her face clearly, high cheekbones, dark eyes that were very still in a way that had nothing to do with calm, lips pressed together as if she was holding something in by force of will alone. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost beside the point. What struck Ethan was the expression, not fear exactly, not distress exactly, but something deeper than both. The look of a person who has just made an irreversible decision and is standing in the aftermath of it, alone, in the rain. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was steady. It was a practiced steady. "You're standing in the rain in a torn prom dress on Route 9 at 11 o'clock at night," Ethan said, keeping his voice even. "With no car and no umbrella. Help me understand how that's fine." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. "It's not a prom dress." "Okay," he said. "You want to get in out of the rain? I've got my daughter in the back seat, so you know exactly who you're dealing with. I'm a mechanic. I live 3 miles from here. I'm not going to hurt you." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the darkness stretching out in both directions on the road. Then she opened the passenger door and got in. The warmth of the truck cab hit her immediately. She sat very straight, her wet dress soaking the seat, her hands folded in her lap. Lily stirred in the back seat and opened her eyes halfway. "Papa?" she murmured. "Go back to sleep, Bug," Ethan said quietly. "Everything's okay." Lily's eyes drifted to the woman in the front seat. "Is she wet?" she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She got caught in the rain." "That happens," Lily said with great seriousness, and closed her eyes again. The woman stared straight ahead. Ethan could see her throat move as she swallowed. Thank you, she said. Sure, he said. I'm Ethan. A pause. Sophia. He did not ask her last name. He did not ask where she'd been or where she was going or what had happened to her dress. He turned the heat up, pulled back onto the road, and drove. The rain hammered the roof of the truck. Lily's soft breathing came from the back seat. Sophia sat with her hands in her lap and looked out the windshield at the road ahead, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, nobody was asking anything of her. Ethan's house was small and warm and looked exactly like what it was, a home that a man had been keeping together by himself for years, with love and not much else. There were crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. There was a pair of tiny sneakers by the front door with the laces tied in enormous, careful knots. There was a coffee mug on the counter that said "World's Okayest Dad," a gift from Lily's preschool teacher. The living room had a worn brown couch with a quilt thrown over the back of it, and a stack of children's books on the coffee table, and a small lamp that cast everything in soft gold light. Sophia stood in the doorway and looked at it all and felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. Ethan carried Lily inside, took her shoes off, and tucked her into bed with the efficiency of a man who had done it 10,000 times. When he came back to the living room, Sophia was still standing in the same spot. He handed her a towel without a word and pointed down the hallway. Bathroom's the second door. There's a robe on the back of the door. Lily bought it for me at a garage sale. It'll be too big but it'll be dry. He moved to the kitchen. I'm making tea. Sit down whenever you're ready. When Sophia came back in the oversized fleece robe, pale blue, patterned with small cartoon bears, Ethan was at the kitchen table with 2 mugs. She sat down across from him. He pushed one mug toward her. She wrapped both hands around it and felt the warmth move up through her palms. They sat in silence for a moment. You don't have to tell me anything, Ethan said. But if you want to, I'll listen. Sophia looked at her tea. I was supposed to get married tonight, she said. He did not react with surprise. He did not flinch or raise his eyebrows or lean in with the hungry curiosity of someone collecting a story. He simply nodded, once, as if this were a reasonable and human thing to say. I left, she said. Before the ceremony. I left. Okay, Ethan said. People don't say okay to that, she said. What do they usually say? She thought about it. They ask why. Or they tell me I made a mistake. Or they ask about the money. She paused. There's a lot of money involved. I don't need to know about the money, Ethan said. And you don't owe anybody a reason for not marrying someone you didn't want to marry. Sophia looked at him across the table, this man in a faded flannel shirt with grease still faintly visible on his hands even though he'd clearly scrubbed them, this man whose home smelled like crayons and dish soap and something baking from earlier in the day, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, I have never had a single conversation that felt this uncomplicated. Can I stay here tonight? She asked. I don't have anywhere I want to go. You can have my room, he said. I'll take the couch. I don't want to push you out of your own bed. You're not pushing me anywhere, he said. I offered. He stood and picked up his mug. There are extra blankets in the closet. Lock the door if it makes you feel better. And if Lily wakes up early and finds you here, just so you know, she will absolutely try to make you play Tea Party before 7 a.m., and there's really no avoiding it. Sophia laughed. It came out before she could stop it, a real laugh, surprised out of her. Okay, she said. Thank you, Ethan. Get some sleep, he said simply, and headed for the couch. Sophia Mercer had grown up in a world where everything had a price and everything had a purpose and human beings were, above all else, assets or liabilities. Her father, Gerald Mercer, had built Mercer Industries from a regional real estate firm into a global development empire over 40 years of ruthless, brilliant maneuvering. He was not a cruel man in the way that villains in stories are cruel. He was something more common and in some ways more damaging. He was a man who had simply never learned the difference between loving someone and finding them useful. To Gerald, Sophia had always been both. She was smart, genuinely, rigorously smart, with a head for numbers and a memory for details that had impressed her father's boardroom colleagues since she was 12 years old. She was also beautiful and poised and well-spoken, and Gerald had understood from very early on that these things had value in the world he operated in. He had raised her accordingly: the best schools, the right social circles, the curated exposure to art and culture and global affairs. He had given her everything, and in exchange, she had given him compliance. Not out of fear, exactly. Out of love. Because Gerald Mercer, for all his coldness, had been the most constant presence in her life, and Sophia had spent 28 years trying to earn a warmth from him that he was constitutionally incapable of giving. Marcus Holloway had entered the picture 3 years ago. He was 54 to Sophia's 25 at the time. He was the kind of man who walked into rooms and changed the pressure in them, not through charm, which requires some generosity of spirit, but through sheer accumulated power. He had made his money in private equity and had spent the last decade remaking himself into a figure of cultural significance, funding museums, backing political campaigns, appearing on magazine covers that described him as visionary. He looked at Sophia the way he looked at a building he intended to acquire. She had tried to like him. She had tried very hard. She'd told herself that the chill she felt when he looked at her was nerves, that his habit of speaking over her in public was a generational thing, that his need to know where she was and who she was with at all times was protectiveness and not control. She had talked herself into nearly every corner of this relationship over the course of 3 years, and then one night, 6 months before the wedding, she had overheard Marcus and her father in Gerald's study, talking about the merger their marriage would make possible, the Mercer-Holloway deal that had been the real architecture of this entire arrangement, and she had stood in the hallway and understood, with a completeness that was almost peaceful, that she had never been a person in this plan. She had been a clause. She had said nothing. She had gone to bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, I will find a way out of this. And then months had passed, and the wedding machinery had accelerated around her, the venue, the guest list, the coverage, the dress, and the way out had kept receding, and she had kept walking forward, one foot in front of the other, because she did not know what else to do. Until the night of the wedding. Until the moment she stood alone in the bridal suite for 30 seconds with no one watching her, and looked at herself in the mirror, and did not recognize the woman looking back. And something in her that had been waiting for a very long time simply said, now. She had left through a service exit. She had walked for 40 minutes in her bridal gown in the November rain before Ethan Caldwell's headlights had found her. She stayed for 3 days. That was the original plan, 3 days, time enough to let the initial chaos settle, to contact her personal attorney, to figure out her next move. She slept in Ethan's room and he slept on the couch, and every morning she woke to the sound of Lily's voice asking Ethan very detailed questions about things she did not fully understand. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs smell everything? Why don't fish get thirsty? Ethan answered every single one with complete seriousness, as though they were important questions deserving of real thought, which, Sophia gradually realized, was exactly how he saw them. On the first morning, Lily found Sophia in the kitchen before Ethan was up and studied her with the frank, evaluating gaze of a 4-year-old. You have pretty hair, she said finally. Thank you, Sophia said. So do you. Lily considered this. Mine is curly. Daddy says it's because I have personality. She made small air quotes with her fingers, clearly unsure what this meant but confident it was positive. Do you want to see my drawings? That was how Sophia spent her first morning in Millbrook, sitting on the living room floor with Lily, receiving a guided tour of approximately 47 crayon drawings, each one explained in detail. That one was their house. That one was Daddy fixing a car. That one was a dinosaur, but also maybe a dog, Lily acknowledged, depending on how you looked at it. Ethan came in from the kitchen with 2 mugs and found them on the floor surrounded by drawings and stopped in the doorway. The expression that crossed his face was there and gone in a second, something unguarded and quiet. He handed Sophia a mug without comment and sat on the couch above them and listened to Lily explain the dinosaur dog. 3 days became a week. Sophia helped with the dishes. She made dinner twice, simple things, pasta and salad, the extent of a cooking education that had been mostly theoretical. Lily declared her pasta the best she had ever had, which Ethan clearly knew was not true but did not contradict. Sophia read to Lily in the evenings when Ethan had late calls for the shop. She sat on the edge of Lily's bed with the picture book in her lap and the small warm weight of the child leaning against her arm, and read about rabbits and lost toys and brave little engines, and felt something in her chest that she had no previous frame of reference for, a specific fullness, an uncomplicated rightness that she had not known she was missing until she was inside it. Ethan watched all of this from a careful distance. He was not a man who performed. He did not make grand gestures or memorable speeches or arrange moments. He simply kept showing up, the same way he always had, consistent and quiet and entirely himself. He brought coffee to the porch in the mornings without being asked because he'd noticed she liked it there. He fixed the latch on the bathroom door without mentioning it. When Sophia's phone buzzed relentlessly, which it did, for the first several days, with a fury she could feel even from across the room, he never once looked over or raised his eyebrows or made her feel observed. She turned her phone off after day 2. It was on the 9th day that the situation arrived in Millbrook. A man in a black SUV came by the shop asking questions. Then a reporter from a national outlet showed up at the diner 2 blocks away. The story had broken. Sophia Mercer, heiress and daughter of Gerald Mercer, had vanished from her own wedding, and the speculation in the press ranged from kidnapping to mental breakdown to staged publicity. Marcus Holloway had made a public statement expressing deep concern for his fiancée's well-being, which Sophia read on Ethan's laptop and recognized for what it was, a first legal move, framing her as unstable, building a narrative. Ethan came home that evening and told her quietly, sitting across the kitchen table, that he had been contacted by 2 lawyers that afternoon, one representing Marcus Holloway, one representing Gerald Mercer. Both conversations had been civil and both had been unmistakably threatening. Sophia looked at him. "Ethan. I'm not telling you to leave," he said immediately. "I'm telling you what's happening so you can make an informed choice about what you want to do next. This is your situation. You get to decide how you handle it." She studied him. "They'll come after your shop. Let them try," he said evenly. "I've been building that shop for 8 years. My reputation in this town is mine. They can't take that with a phone call. You don't know what these people are capable of." "Maybe not," he said. "But I know what I am. And I'm not the kind of person who asks somebody to leave because things got complicated." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to make a call." She called her attorney, her own attorney, not the family firm's lawyers, a woman named Dana Reeves she had retained privately 2 years ago out of some half-conscious act of self-preservation. Dana had been waiting for this call. She had, in fact, prepared for it. Because Sophia Mercer, as Marcus and Gerald had perhaps not fully accounted for in their calculations, was not merely the decorative piece of their arrangement. She was a shareholder in Mercer Industries. A significant one. Her mother's estate had left her a stake that her father had always assumed she was too compliant to act on. She was done being compliant. The calls and the lawyers and the press statements took 2 weeks to work through, during which Sophia stayed in Millbrook, during which the SUVs came and went, during which Ethan went to work every morning and came home every evening and let Lily conduct nightly tea parties in the living room to which Sophia was always formally invited. Marcus Holloway's legal team sent 3 increasingly aggressive letters. Sophia's team responded to each one. Gerald Mercer called twice. Sophia answered both times and said the same thing: she was not returning to the arrangement,